Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, Dan, we're live. We got a special Monday edition since tomorrow is Christmas Eve. So Merry Christmas to you and everyone that's watching.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Jeremy, and everybody that's on.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in. Today's show is titled, well, I always say this wrong, so Failing to Prepare is Preparing to Fail. Had to read it off the screen so I didn't mess it up. But Dan, we were talking after last week's show, and season's still going on for you. It's still going on for a lot of people. But for those guys that like to travel and to build points in some of these places, a lot of those application periods are right around the corner, and it's easy to forget about that with the holidays and New Year. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I think we got a news article we're going to cover. And then, again, season's not over for you, but we're going to reflect back on the season, see what we could have done better, maybe take a look at our gear, things like that we can improve upon next year. So that's the theme for today. So let's start out with that news article, Dan. So you sent me an article earlier this week, kind of crazy. Let me get that pulled up here. So the title of the article is Virginia Man Dies After Bear Shot in Tree Falls on Him. So I'll just read a quick summary here. This paragraph says, a hunting group was following the bear when it ran up a tree, the department said. As the group retreated from the tree, a hunter shot the bear. The animal fell onto another hunter who was standing about 10 feet from the bottom of the tree. The department identified the man as Lester C. Harvey, 58, of Phoenix, Virginia. A member of the group rendered first aid before Harvey was rushed to two different hospitals. He died from his injuries, the wildlife department stated. So pretty crazy story there. And real quick, at the end, it says, in 2018, a man in Alaska was critically injured after his hunting partner shot a bear on a ridge. The animal tumbled down a slope into the man, who was also struck by rocks dislodged by the bear. So it's hard to believe this can happen, but apparently this happened. This article is from December 17th, 2024.
Well, if you're worried about that happening to you, I've got some advice. Probably don't stand right underneath the bear when somebody's shooting it.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to stand right underneath it anyways, not directly straight down below it, whether it's being shot at or not. That's pretty crazy that somebody would even put themselves in that position.
Yeah,
I would have to imagine it was probably somebody going to get the dogs, because sometimes they pull the dogs off or something, and maybe there was a dog under it or something. He was trying to pull the dog back. They think of those dogs like they're kids. That's the only thing I can think could possibly be a reason you'd be right directly underneath the bear.
Yeah, the article doesn't give a lot of context, but you're right. Something like that could happen. And it seems like anybody that has ever bear hunted with hounds before, or even has an idea about it, you would expect that they would know better than to be that close. So that's kind of what happens when you shoot them out of a tree. They fall out of the tree.
Yeah.
So
not only that, most of the time they come down. I mean, you hit them, they come down, hit the ground, and take off running. They can. The reason you pull the dogs back is because the bear is still capable of killing somebody. I mean, it's like a deer or anything else. You shoot it doesn't die instantly.
Yeah,
it's got 60 seconds of adrenaline, which can be a long time. So you can fall out of the tree and rip up a dog or something. So you wouldn't want to be anywhere near where that bear's going to hit the ground. You want to be, 20 feet back or so.
So if you guys are getting out to do any bear hunting this year, valuable lesson there. Don't stand too close to the tree.
And whoever tells you to get underneath it and catch it when it falls, they're kidding. It's a joke.
Yeah. Let's see which one of my friends will do this. So we are still having the Lathrop & Sons giveaway going on. So we're going to do the last of the insole and gift card giveaway today. So real quick, You're going to get these 2 insoles here. We got the non-typical and the Synergy insole and a $50 gift card. We're not doing that right now. We'll announce the number drawing later. We'll just give you a heads up. We are doing that today. And then next week, I talked to Steven. We're going to try to get Steven on. We might do Monday again next week because I think Tuesday's New Year's Eve. So going to try to get Steven on to announce the winner. If you guys haven't already signed up to be eligible to win, there's a link in the video description. You got to go to the Lathrop & Sons site to be eligible to win the grand prize, which is a pair of boots. So if you haven't done that, great giveaway there that Steven and Lathrop & Sons are putting on. So go ahead and sign up for that, because why wouldn't you want a pair of free boots?
They're pretty good boots too. I got them. You got them.
Yeah.
They're not cheap, but I mean, they get a snug, tight fit, and they give me really good ankle support, and they've been lasting me quite a while. I don't wear them on every hunt, but I wear them whenever I'm in hill country or dry ground, and I like them a lot.
Yeah, I put a ton of miles on my boots, and I wore them all fall, and nothing but good things to say. Dan, so we talked about failing to prepare. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, and this is coming from a guy that's hunted out west now. I'm a little over 40 years old. Western hunting, for the most part, I mean, you can do it when you're older, but if you want to get after it, it's a young man's game. And I wish somebody would have told me when I was 18 or even 15, 20, whatever. If you want a Western hunt, start buying points. Even if you don't plan to go for 5 years or 10 years, people don't realize, I think, at least I didn't, maybe I'm slower than a lot of people, but if you grow up in the Midwest, you don't realize some of these elk hunts in Montana, Wyoming, Arizona, these are 5, 8, 10, 12 point, 15 point draws. And you normally only accrue a point a year. So if you want to elk hunt in a good unit, you're looking at a lot of times, like I said, 8, 10, 12 points. Well, if you start buying them when you're 22, you're not elk hunting until you're 30, 35, 40. And if you want to go on a couple different hunts, it's a good idea if you can afford it, obviously. Most of the states are pretty reasonable, 25, 50, something like that, dollars per point, but start accruing some of these points. So real quick, I looked up some of the deadlines. The earliest one that I know of is Wyoming. Then people jump in if you know of an earlier one, but deer and elk applications for non-residents are due at the end of January. So January 31st. So if you're looking to, I think you can buy points longer, but if you're actually applying January 31st, and I'm pretty sure in Wyoming you can buy points all the way into like September, October. And then Arizona, February 4th, New Mexico, March 19th. I know Montana for deer and elks, April 1st. So if you guys are considering that or building points or applying, don't forget about those deadlines. Dan, we talked about this offline, but I like to, every year I've got calendar reminders, mid-application period to remind me, because it's so easy to forget about that stuff. And the other thing is, if you do have a phone reminder, when it comes up, do it that day or you'll forget. I've done that before.
Yeah, Hunt Reminder's a good tool. Onyx owns that. So if you have like the Onyx Elite app, it's free with your subscription, but you can buy it separate. But having that, if you already have that, which a lot of members I'm sure do if they travel and hunt, if they hunt more than one state, I'm sure they have the Onyx Elite membership. If you have that, Hunt Reminder is free with it. And you can go through Hunt Reminder and you can click everything you're interested in, and you will get texts and emails telling you when it's coming up, and then giving you like a 3-day warning, and then giving you a day of, in hours, your app will be no good,
Right.
And I need that. I mean, otherwise I'd forget, on a lot of stuff. So I really love that app.
Yeah, pretty helpful. So if you guys haven't already signed up for that, that's a great tool, or whatever your method is, however you get organized. But we just wanted to bring it up because, like I said, with the holidays and stuff, before you know it, you blink and then it's January 31st and you miss the deadline for Wyoming. So
yeah, if you use Spartan Forge, you can still get Hunt Reminder. You just buy it separately. Just Google Hunt Reminder. It's not very expensive.
Okay, good tip there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, Dan, and I know this is something you do as well, I've had some of my best luck when I travel talking to biologists and game wardens and stuff. I feel like a lot of people either do that right at the time they're going to apply, or they do that right before they go to hunt. Those are the busiest times. I try to call them on the off season, April or May, whenever that is, February, whenever the off season is. And I found that they're usually a lot more patient. And they're more willing to give you intel off season than they are maybe after they've had the same conversation 500 times with the guys that have called before you. So, Dan, when you call those people, what do you like to ask them, or what do you talk to them about?
I usually ask them where the best chances that mature animals are, like where the highest density of. Because biologists usually have a grasp on the age structure. Where they feel my best chances are for the most deer in the upper age classes. And I like to ask them about new areas opening up. A lot of times there'll be a property that just opens up. No, I might be talking whitetails too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But any place that's going to be, give me an advantage. I'm not necessarily looking for numbers. Some people are. You want the most deer? A lot of people flock to the most deer areas. I don't. I flock to the areas that have the better age structures because I want to hunt mature animals. If there's something that can give me an advantage, like is there something where if I work harder, I can do better? Like an area where I can get really remote and people don't go. Sometimes they'll know that stuff. But usually the places that are really remote, that are hard to get to, go hand in hand with the age structure. So sometimes it can have to do with population dynamics too, and just where people go. And sometimes the biologists will know that. I mean, I had a biologist approach me a few years back and tell me a specific public property that he did a little study on, and he said nobody was hunting it, and there's giant bucks running everywhere. And I went in there for a hunt, and he was right. There was nobody hunting it, and he just happened to know that because he had to go around and look at the properties in his county, But the one thing about asking those biologists questions and stuff, not every one of them is the same. Not every biologist has the same amount of knowledge. Not every biologist is as willing to help you as others. I found some biologists will bend over backwards and help you in any way they can. And they just love the fact that you're so interested in their area that you're willing to ask questions and learn, and I've had other ones tell me, why should I tell you anything, and give you an advantage over our residents,
Yeah.
Every one of them is different. You could just pick up the phone and call a different one too. Which sucks if they're county specific but most states have multiple biologists that work in multiple areas. So, just like any aspect of life, some of them are jerks and some of them are okay guys, and some of them will bend over backwards to help you.
Yeah. And the other thing, we've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. Obviously, if you're going on a travel hunt, read the regulations, whatever the guidebook is. But I always call the game warden for kind of like the short list cheat sheet. And I always ask them, hey, what are the top 3 or 4 violations that you see in your area from non-residents? What are things that I should know that guys get, in trouble for a lot? And it's usually just, for lack of better term, ignorance. They didn't read the regs, or it's something that's known by locals that's not known by you as an out-of-state person. And overwhelmingly, the answer I always get there, number 1, is trespassing, which obviously that's why most people get in trouble, and I don't do that, so I don't have to worry about that. But
my number 1 answer on that one was not signing licenses. A lot of states make you sign the licenses, and some states don't. And guys that are from states where you don't sign the licenses often don't know you have to do that. And literally, it's a huge deal in those states. It's like you're signing a contract. But that's a big one that comes up a lot when you ask them. They'll say, make sure that your license is signed. That's not every state, but a lot of them do have that.
Yeah. And Dan, what are some other resources this time of year? Besides mapping and biologists, if you're doing research for a state that you've never hunted or only hunted 1 or 2 times, what else are you looking at this time of year to prepare for next year?
I'll be studying maps a lot, looking at the public areas. You can study record books and stuff too, but they're starting to become obsolete. I mean, it used to be the majority of people put their deer in the record books. Now it's the majority don't.
Yeah.
And, so they're coming a little obsolete. But knowing what counties grow the biggest animals, that kind of thing really helps. But research for me usually revolves around people, talking to people I know that hunt those areas, talking to biologists, state officials, trying to find some sort of studies on the state on age classes and stuff. And sometimes that can be done with Google searches. You can learn a lot through Google. I tell you one thing you can't trust that a lot of people do is some of the newer searches that they do with AI, because AI takes data out of like public consumption. Like I had talked about making like an Ask Dan app. What it would do is AI would take all the questions I've ever been asked, like online and stuff, and put it in a thing. The answers aren't 100% accurate because it'll take a wrong answer and put it in there too, because it's comes across as common knowledge, and the AI just copies. So you can't trust that. So you could do a Google search and it gives you bad information. But people can give you bad information too. I mean, you could literally have a biologist that works for the state give you wrong information. And if it ain't in a text or it ain't in an email, and you break a law and you can't say, well, the biologist told me, they're not going to believe you. So you have to actually back up and make sure that you actually know what the laws are and what the rules are. And, but AI isn't all that accurate. People are more accurate. They're going to give you better details and better places. But there's also, if you just ask people that you don't know that well, they'll throw you off. A lot of guys will, if they hunt in Boone County, they're going to tell you Sawyer County is the place to go.
Right.
They're going to tell you they might tell you a good spot, like a halfway decent spot, but they're not going to tell you their spot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So doing a little research with actually people and trust that hunt in other states and stuff that you bonded with online, and then you kind of back that up, check with biologists, stuff, kind of narrow the field, look at a lot of maps, and look at the public properties. Make sure it's an area, if you're hunting public, that has a lot of public to offer. If it's got one kind of property or something or two, and there's another county that's got 10, the one that has 10 is going to have their hunters more spread out. You know what I mean? Than the place that has one property.
The other thing with that is don't assume anything on Spartan Forge Onyx that shows up as public is actually huntable. Some of these Western states, when they lease out the public ground for grazing, whoever the leasee is, they get the hunting rights too. So you hear about stories like that where guys are hunting on properties that look like they're public on these apps and they're not. So it's again,
Nebraska had something like that. They had properties that were public, but the state leased them to hunters to hunt on.
Yeah.
And then they had properties that were public, but you could hunt on them. And there wasn't really signs at the leased properties, but Onyx kind of told you which ones were leased. They don't always.
Yeah, due diligence is the name of the game. One more thing, we'll move on from the, accumulating your points and stuff. I've found personally, I really enjoy antelope or pronghorn hunting, and there's more opportunities out west than, again, call me naive Midwesterner, but I didn't realize there was all these things to hunt, or that they were as accessible as they were. Some of these things I'm going to say aren't accessible, but pronghorn, if you put in for a couple of years, a lot of states, the best one odds wise is Wyoming, but Montana, a couple of years you can usually draw, and you got Western South Dakota, you can draw a tag, not too difficult. Arizona, New Mexico, those places. So to me, that's a fun hunt. I like to meet a lot and kind of a unique trophy, especially if you're from the Midwest, something different. And then there's other things like mountain goat, bighorn sheep. There's cat hunts out here. Dan, we kind of talked about that a little before, but there's a lot of opportunities. And if these are things that you have any interest in, especially like a Western moose, bighorn sheep, mountain goat, these are like once in a lifetime draws. So that if you are interested in, the sooner you can start applying for those points, accumulating them, the better chance you'll have. And some of those tags, there is a likelihood you'll just never draw them, like bighorn sheep for non-residents. The resident odds are abysmal, and the non-resident odds are are even crazier. But you can't draw if you don't ever build points or apply. So there's that. But Dan, let's move on to reflecting on our season. So let's start out with equipment issues. Do you have any equipment issues or anything you're looking to upgrade going into next year, and why? Or what would you recommend to people to be cognizant of going into next year?
I don't know if I'm looking to upgrade, but I'll go over my equipment pretty close. And I know some of my stuff has started to take a beating, and it always is about this time of the year, and occasionally I'll tighten some stuff during the season and stuff. But after season, I'm really going to go over my stand and my camera arm. Camera arm might not matter to a lot of the people listening, but your stand should. You're going to have to look at your cables connecting your platform to your post, because if they fail, you fall. And they can kink. They're steel. They can kink back and forth, and they can break. They can rust. The bolts become loose. You got to make sure they're tight. And something about those locking nuts that we use and most people use is, from a manufacturing standpoint, the locking part of it is plastic. The plastic turns into a thread that binds on the thread. And when they loosen up over time, and you tighten them, and you tighten them, and you tighten them, even though it's just that little bit of turn, that back and forth movement opens that up a little bit, and those nuts get looser and looser. And after a while, it's not a bad idea to replace those nuts. And, just make sure everything's tight. None of the holes are wearing off. You don't want those bolts to be loose at all on a stand, on a stick or anything, because if they're loose, and there's any kind of movement from them being loose, you might not even really notice it that much. You just notice that there's something a little loose. That movement will open up the holes that, I don't know about other companies, but we keep ours at a really tight tolerance. So it's just above the bolt size. But if it's loose, it'll whir back and forth, and it'll egg shape those holes. And then you'll always have some movement. It'll gain some noise out of that. So you want to make sure you keep those bolts tight. If you notice something loosening up, tighten it right away. But I will go over my stands really close after the season before I put them away. And I will make sure there's no squeaks or creaks or anything like that. I'll wax the washers with the bowstring wax. I'll make sure that if I need to replace a nut, I replace the nut. If I need to tighten something, I tighten it. You can take those nuts too. You can put removable Loctite on them too, and you get them to a tightened spot. And that might be a better option for some people too, because they might not be able to find anything but chrome-coated nuts, which are going to look a little funny on your stand if you replace it. But if you put a little Loctite on there, not the permanent.
Yeah, the blue stuff, not the red stuff.
Blue Loctite, yeah. And just get it to your tightness, and then just let that Loctite harden. Because you can break that stuff free if you have to wax it or whatever. But then it should stay without loosening if it is loosening up. But check all your connections and stuff, your cables on your stands. Make sure there's no cuts in your cables, no nicks. Take a good look at your bows. Make sure there's no nicks in your strings and cables and stuff in the, your mechanisms and all that crap. Just go over everything really close. I mean, a lot of people don't put the stress on that I do. But I mean, if you're hunting mobile, it's a lot different than having a stand locked to a tree. It's in one position. It's not being put up and down. It's not being pulled through brush. It's not, not being dropped from a tree every now and then. It's not, you're not falling down with it on. When you hunt mobile, you put that stand through a lot of work. You know what I mean? And things loosen up, things break, things go bad. So you got to really, keep up with that stuff.
Yeah, your bow too, like you said, especially if you're into new areas that you haven't been in a lot, and you're bushwhacking red brush and stuff. It's like your sight pins, your drop away rest with the cords on them and stuff, all that stuff. It can get beat up, and now is a good time. So I've been guilty of it before, but the older I get, the more I've been diligent on this stuff. Is when the season ends, like I just oiled all my firearms, right? Put them away, like my hunting rifle and stuff, and shotguns that I had out. So I didn't forget about them for 9 months, pull them out next year, and they got rusty fingerprints all over them and stuff. So it's easy for this stuff to get away from you. And yeah, I think we were talking about this before. I won't say his name, but a friend of mine, we were talking about this last week after the show, and you're like, yeah, some people aren't getting their stuff out until the week before the season next year. And I literally have a friend who said he couldn't find some of his hunting stuff, and he found it in a garbage bag in his basement that he had put down there after hunting with me last year. So it had sat in his basement for like 10 months and he couldn't find the stuff. So these are real life stories. So if you've got the time right now, or make the time, it only takes a day or two to do a lot of this stuff, but make some time and prepare right now. So you're not rushing around scrambling. You got better things to be doing next fall when the season's approaching, like getting out and glassing, running trail cameras, trying to track down the buck you're going to hunt, as opposed to messing around with all your gear.
Yeah, you should probably go through all your stuff right after the season, where you know where it's at, kind of thing, and put it all together. Because if you're missing something, like you're missing a glove, something was tore, you're going to replace something, you're going to forget. You're going to remember when you go to get your stuff together, opening weekend next year or something, and then you're going to have issues.
Yeah, and on that note, Dan, let's talk about maybe tactics-wise or scouting-wise. What are, if anything, what are some things that you did this year that you're going to have going into next year at the top of your mind? Like, what are you going to do right after the season ends? Do you take notes? Do you say, hey, I hunted this spot and it was hot during this time of year? How do you get your tactics lined up for next year?
But the biggest thing for me that's going to be a change for next year is I'm going to get more hardcore about really pushing the limits and being in places where people don't go. I'm going to be more hardcore about getting into places that are treeless, places where I know people don't hunt. I know some great spots that have been great for years, and I just got to get that out of my head that they're no longer great because people are hunting them. If you're standing in line to hunt a spot, no matter how great it's been in the past, even if there's bucks coming in there, your odds are going way down. They're hard enough on public. And really, in the spots that people hunt there once every few weeks, whether it's a great location or not, mature bucks start to figure that out, and they will avoid it. So if you really want to get something gigantic, I'm sure everybody would like to get a nice 140 class buck. Probably the majority of the people listening to this would. There's a few people that would hold out for something bigger, but the majority would. So you're like, well, if I hunt there, I might get a 140. Well, you just wasted your chance at getting a giant. Maybe you only get a giant once every 10 or 20 years, but you don't get any if you don't hunt them, because it's a whole different animal. And they're living where people don't go. And there are spots like that, even in all this pressure. And I mean, the pressure around me has gone up like crazy. It is just nuts over here with people. But I could still get on deer by going into the areas where these people don't go. It's a lot harder to hunt. The tree selection is a lot harder. Sometimes you got to get on the ground. There's things you got to do. There's sacrifices you got to make. But the biggest part is you got to be where the bucks are. You can't kill them if you're not where they're at. So my biggest move for next year is going to be to get more into those hardcore spots. And that's going to start day one when my hunting stops and my scouting starts.
Great advice. Dan, we're on the same page. So one of my better mule deer hunting areas is absolutely abysmal the last 2 years. Like, I've talked to you about it offline, but where I would see 60 deer in a day, 2019, 2020, I'm seeing like 8 now. Like, the numbers have dropped off a cliff, and I've talked about it a few times, but real quick, I think it's because we had real bad drought 2 or 3 years. Then we had a terrible winter, 22, 23. Almost all of Montana has, in varying degrees, CWD now. There's been EHD. Like, it's been a perfect storm. There's a lot of hunting pressure. They won't cut the tags back. So there's a lot of factors contributing to it. But there's still good deer around. I see good deer getting shot on public land. One of the things that I'm going to do personally next year is I'm going to camp more, which a lot of guys are just day hiking. People get out there. They'll get out there 5, 6, 7 miles, even on a day hike. But I'm going to look for larger areas with smaller pockets where I can hike in 4 or 5 miles and then hunt beyond that on a second or third day. So I think next year I'm going to do a lot more 2 and 3 overnights just to try to get in the same thing you're doing, get into these real overlooked spots, because those spots, even if they don't have good numbers, they have the older age class of deer, and that's what I'm looking for also. Well, let's go ahead, and we got 185 people. So pick a number 1 through 185, and the first one to guess it without going over. Only one guess each, please. And then if we don't have an exact match, we'll pick the closest without going over on the hour. So good luck to everyone there. I'm going to watch those for a second. And Dan, I know you don't wear much camo, but to me, this is a great time of year to pick up some deals too. So usually right after, I mean, there's deals going on now, but it seems like January, there's a fire sale that goes on. So it's a great time if you've got the money after Christmas, which not everybody does, but it's a great time to pick up a deal on gear and clothes if you got the time. So anything you're looking at going into this winter?
I'm pretty set. Last year I bought a complete Osseo setup, and that's pretty nice. It keeps me nice and warm. Great for wintertime. I do wear a lot more camouflage in wintertime. Those deer pick you off so easy when there's no leaf cover at all. You
don't got the white dress shirt out yet?
I got the white camo ready, but I haven't worn it yet.
That's good. And Dan, talk to me about your plans. Did I hear right? Your season is over or partially over for right now? What's going on with that? I don't know Wisconsin.
Well, what we had for the last week of November was gun season. The first week of December was muzzleloader season. Muzzleloader season ended, and immediately doe season started with guns, and went for like 4 days. And then we had this little short window, which ended tonight, where we could hunt bucks with a bow.
Okay.
And now I have 10 days of doe hunting, which sucks because we don't really need to have the herd population knocked down that far. But they're going to do it anyways, whether we like it or not. And when that ends, I get almost a full month, like from the 3rd to the end of January, to bow hunt again. The trouble is a lot of them are shedding. I've got we're about to do a 10-day doe only season, or antlerless only. And I've got probably 4 different bucks on camera that are shed already. And the majority of bucks I'm getting on film are button bucks. Then you got shed bucks, and they're going to decimate the bucks. So I don't like it too much. But so I'm going to leave during that 10 days. I'm not going to hunt Wisconsin because I'm not going to participate in that doe hunt. And I'm going to hunt Nebraska probably. That's what I'm looking at right now.
Nice. That'll be exciting. You're going to film that, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll be curious to see how that goes, because last year you and Eric that was last year, right? You guys went to the UP?
Yeah.
I got a feeling it'll be a slightly different hunt in Nebraska, for better or for worse, but it'll be interesting to see how that compares to what you guys did last year in the UP, and if you get on any deer and where they're at.
Yeah, I don't know what we'll run into when we get out there, but we're going to give it a shot.
Well, that'll be exciting to follow along with. And Danny just released a video. I watched, I don't know if I watched the whole thing, but at least half of it today. And for people that don't watch your videos, I think most people watching this podcast probably watch them, but really insightful to see what you're looking at. And we talked about the workshops last week too. That was one of the most helpful things for me when I went to your workshop, was just like hearing you think out loud. You can read the forum and you can read your responses, but hearing you think out loud, and you do a great job of that when you're filming yourself and talking through your process and the sign you're looking for and pointing out some of those details. So I don't know. I thought that was a real good video.
Yeah, I think it is a good video if people want to watch it. It's about how I handle this short little season in between doe season and doe season, where these deer are really pressured. But how I searched till I found a pocket of deer, and then how I analyze what they're doing, and kind of tracked them back and hunted them. I think it's a pretty good video.
Dan, let's do some questions. Sunrise Farm ME says, Dan, what was the number one thing you learned from this season?
Kind of already talked about that. The number one thing I learned was to avoid trees.
Yeah.
Find places where people aren't going. The bucks are still here. These guys are not killing these big bucks. The bucks I've been after since the beginning of the season are still there. Lots of more people hunting them, but they're still there. They're more educated. They're harder to kill because of these people. And what I need to do is figure out the niches where they're at. Well, I kind of already know. I just need to scout a little better into those spots, figure out ways to hunt them. I think finding where these big bucks live is not hard for me. To me, it's pretty obvious. The trick is going to be figuring out how to hunt them in those areas.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point there. And I don't mean to, however this comes across, I don't mean to disrespect any other hunter. Let me preface with that. But guys that are inexperienced, or maybe they're newer to the tactics, or whatever the reason is that they don't have maybe everything down, because you got to have the total package. That I think what's going on is, Dan, you've talked about it before, you're seeing more cell cameras, and a lot of times once a guy gets a picture of a big buck, then he's more likely to hunt an area that maybe he otherwise wouldn't. Maybe he wouldn't hike out that 1.5 miles or bust the cattails or whatever. He gets out there, and he does get out there, but then he either approaches it wrong or he overhunts it or whatever, and that's driving that deer out of that area where it otherwise would be a sanctuary. And it's just, yeah, it's putting them into even weirder areas now, it seems like.
Yeah.
What else we got? Dan, did you have pneumonia when you shot that buck in the rain in the morning in November? Not sure what that one's about.
Buck I shot in the rain in November. This year? I didn't shoot anything this year.
Yeah, I don't know what Ernie Berry. Let me know what you mean there. Elaborate on that question. What year was that, or what buck? Daniel Hopkins says, Dan, do you think you would have been more successful to staying in the same state you're in as opposed to traveling?
I do, yeah. But I like the traveling. I it's always been an issue with me, like a conflict within me leaving, because really when I travel, it's all fun and games, but when I'm here, it's serious about going after a certain animal. And then when I leave, I'm leaving the animals I'm hunting. When I come back, I got to re-scramble, figure out everything that's been going on, because I'm kind of keeping track while I'm here. You know what I mean? I know what's going on in the different areas and stuff. And in the bow hunting world, I think you can say this a million times, people just don't get it. But things change so dramatically in the fall from one week to the next that if you miss a week or two, like your weekend warriors that just hunt weekends, and I'm not knocking them, I'm just saying that they got a real setback there, because things change so much week to week on how the deer bed, how they feed, and where they're going. You just think about the acorn drop, the leaves changing, the corn coming into the right ripeness, all the things that change, the cover, as the cover starts to dwindle, how they're moving. These deer are changing throughout the whole season. The most easiest times to pattern deer are the very start of the season and the very end of the season, because those are the areas of time that have the least change, where deer aren't moving around as much, as they start to stay in the same patterns, the same types of bedding areas and stuff. That's not to say you can't bump them out of those, but it gets a little easier to run into a pattern, hunt it, and kind of expect that deer to show up.
No, it's a great point, and I'd agree. The predictable early season, especially, and we've talked about this quite a bit, so I won't beat the dead horse here, but if you guys are living in a state with an October opener and you want to travel for a non-rut hunt, that's been eye-opening to me, hunting out west with where you got, first weekend of September or September 1st openers or first 10 days or whatever. It's a very different hunt. And if you get the time where you can come out a couple of days before, scout, and then hunt the opener, you got a great crack at getting a good buck.
Yeah.
Ernie, hold on, where to go here? He answered. He was the one asking about the buck in November. He says you were sick and you got up in the thunderstorm.
Oh yeah, that was a long time ago. That was back in the 90s. That was a giant 8-pointer that I shot. I didn't have pneumonia, but I was pretty sick. I was pretty sick, and I forced myself to go out and hunt that deer. And yeah, it was a thunderstorm or something. And I actually shot the deer. I remember the arrow went right through it, and there's a river behind it and into the river, and gone forever at the bottom of that river someplace. But the deer ran off, and I was pretty sure I killed it. And I was so sick that I was like hunched up, dry heaving, puking.
Oh, geez.
And I mean, just cramped up and just shivering uncontrollably after the shot. I couldn't even go look for the deer. I went back to my vehicle, went home, I was completely soaked. I went out there sick, and then I just sat there in this drenching rain, and I laid there until I dried out, and then went out there and with a friend and recovered the buck. But yeah, it was miserable.
You gotta want it, kids. You gotta want it.
Yeah, you gotta want it. Yeah, I don't know if I do that these days, but back then I wanted it that bad.
Yeah. Rob Nauer says, if you could have one scenario back from this year while hunting and make it a do-over, what would it be?
That would obviously be the day that I kicked myself for this because I kind of gave up. I was hunting a big buck. I talked about this a little in the videos, but you got to be paying attention to catch on to it. My son, on his way to work and back, was going past a piece of public property, kept telling me about this giant 10-pointer kept crossing the road in front of him. Near daylight in the morning, going into public land to bed. So I went out there with Eric. We went out and looked at the property, dropped some cameras in there, and tried to get a picture of this thing. And I got one picture where I think it was that buck, where all I have is a couple of really long tines in the camera where it was right up against the camera. But obviously the buck has to be very big, but that's all I could see. But I could never get and that was in velvet. It was just before season. So he was still seeing the buck into season, not every day, but he drives that route every single day. So if it's once every 2 weeks or so, what's the timing? You got to say that deer's probably doing it almost every day if his timing is seeing it once in every 2 weeks, But the deer was coming through before legal, but not much before, So we had scouted the whole area. We kind of figured out what we thought. We hunted and hunted and hunted it, and never came across this deer. Meanwhile, I just left those cameras out there and started getting pictures of, the 140 class bucks, and which, a legitimate 140 class buck is a pretty nice buck.
Yeah.
And a couple of them, in a day going past the same camera, and I was hunting this buck pretty religiously. And my rule is to never hunt a 140 class buck. I don't legitimately purposely hunt them. And that might sound weird, but if I'm onto something bigger, I'd rather do the low odds hunt for the big animal. And, I'd rather buy the lottery ticket for the $100 million prize than the one where I might win $5.
Right.
But my chances are higher on the $5, right? Or maybe $100 would be a better example. I got a better odds at the 100. I'd rather go for the 100 million. $100 at smile. Go, oh, nice, I won. So I kind of caved in when those 140s kept showing up on that camera every day, and I thought I'm going to go out there and just kill one of them. And I'm going to run off to this state and that state or whatever. And I kind of kicked myself for letting myself down on my rule to just go after those big ones. But I went out there, and it was like there's some bigger power watching me and going to teach me a lesson. And I went out there, and I wasn't hunting where this camera was. The camera was set up in a funnel. I rarely hunt right where a camera is. But the camera is set up in a funnel, and I'm hunting further back where everything kind of comes together. And it really isn't a good spot for a camera because all the trails come by, but they don't, one camera couldn't cover anything anyways, right? So I'm sitting back here, and I know that the trail, they got the pictures of that box. They came from 200 yards up through here. At least that's what I'm assuming. And those bucks were coming through late morning on that camera. And I still figured they were getting out to where I was. Just basically was nothing in there between there that I thought was bedding. And the wind was a just off wind, just off. But I knew pheasant season was going to, and this is what teased me into it. Pheasant season was about to open the next day. And if I didn't go in there and kill one of these bucks, the whole area was going to end up with pheasant hunters. But still, in hindsight, according to my own logic, I shouldn't have let that get in my head, and I should have went after that big buck. But I kind of did, because I kind of sat back to where all those trails come together, and there's a bigger sign than when I thought those deer were leaving. So I sat there, and I'm kind of watching where those bucks are coming from. And as the sun comes up, as it often does, it changes the wind direction a little bit when it changes, where the sun's shining, the thermals kind of crap, right? Yeah. And that just off wind turned dead wrong. And it was blowing right to where I thought those deer would come from. Drop milkweed, and it's going right there. And I'm getting a little antsy, and I drop milkweed, and it goes right there. And I'm thinking, in a half an hour, those bucks are going to show up, and my wind's going to blow right to them. I better just get down. Now think about the logic in that. This is kind of why I'm kicking myself. Yeah, the wind's blowing right at them. What's going to happen tomorrow? The whole place is going to fill up with pheasant hunters. I got no hunt. So they're going to get blown out of there anyway, so I might as well just sit there. But I didn't. I didn't want to blow them out of there. I thought, well, maybe I get in here tomorrow morning and before the pheasant hunters, blah, blah, blah. And, I decided to just call it quits and grab my stuff and get out of there before these things came and smelled me. I turn around and I grab my camera on my camera arm, and I hear something. I look back, and here's this giant buck, and I'm sure it's the one that we were looking for. The one my kids saw, it was just this giant frame buck. I mean, really wide, heavy, just a monster, absolute monster, staring at me in the tree at like 40 yards. And the trail it was on would have walked right underneath me. And it was just a matter, I don't even think it would have been 2 minutes. If I would have just waited 2 minutes more, I think the thing would have walked right underneath me. With my shooting, that doesn't mean I would have killed it, but but I should have, And yeah, I kind of kicked myself for that. I think that was a hard lesson.
Yeah, if people are being honest, it's hard to stay 100% in the game 100% of the season. I've found myself doing it. I'm sure everybody that's being honest with themselves at some time or another has convinced themselves, like you did, Dan, that now's the time to get out of a tree, or I'm freezing to death, or I got to get back to work, whatever the reason is. But it seems like, geez, a bunch of those times, that's the time when, as you're doing that, climbing down the tree, or your bow's on the ground and you're starting to take your stand down, you look up and there's the buck you're after. And it's like, that's the only time.
Most often what beats you is the thing between your ears.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. Let's see. We had a couple more. Trout and Morels wants to know, how are you liking the peep sight? Didn't you get like a clarifier or whatever is?
I have a little bit of hard time with it in real low light. I also have a hard time with the pins in low light too, where they're just too small. I mean, they work great most of the day, but that last, I want to say just probably the last 10 minutes or something, it's a little fuzzy. So I don't know. I kind of almost want to take the whole peep off and just go back to the string and, having a kisser.
Yeah.
String and nose. That worked well for me for years. And that, with my vision, that peep is just, I got the hole like this now. It's to the point where why are you even using one if the hole's that giant,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've never used one of those, but I know I wear glasses. I'm sure that's in my future. A lot of guys, older guys that I know, are going to those. I forget the name of them. Someone jump in there. I'll have to look at the chat later because I'm trying to stay in the questions. But I think one's a rectifier or clarifier, something. They do different things. I don't know what they do.
I haven't totally given up on it. I just I want to experiment a little.
Yeah, maybe it's a matter of like contact lenses, finding the one that works for your eye.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, Tony Thorson wants to know, in certain types of habitats like swamp, farm, hill country, do you notice bucks shedding closer to their core area depending on the habitat type?
Depending on the habitat type, I would say big woods. They could be shedding anywhere. I mean, they move a lot. They migrate a lot. They migrate out of marshes a little bit. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Even farm country. But big woods, I think they migrate the most. But if you get down south, I think you have a lot more likelihood. The further south you go, I shouldn't say down south, but the further south you go, the more likelihood you would have of them dropping those antlers right where they usually live. Because in the northern states, they tend to migrate to food. Like a lot of times in wintertime, a whole nother buck will show up in an area that I don't even know. The bucks that I'm hunting will move a little bit. Now, with that said, a lot of the bucks I'm hunting right now, I've been hunting all season, but there's food sources around them because I'm in a pretty food-rich area. So they're not moving big distances. But I still see where there's food sources, deer migrating in that come from areas where I couldn't hunt them, like off of private and stuff. Wintertime, they do migrate a little bit to food. You find the sheds around food.
Yeah, if guys are into shed hunting, that's the best tip I can give you is drive around for the next month or two and try to get some eyeballs on some bucks because they don't move a whole lot this time of year, and wherever you're seeing them is where they're going to be shedding. And I give you a prime example. The first year I was here, so it would have been spring of 19. Some friends and I went out to a public land, and they had left a cornfield standing that year on the public, which was rare in this area. And we got lucky because this was our first time in there, but we were seeing tons of deer sign around the cornfield, and then we started finding sheds, and there was 4 of us together, but in one day we found 16 or 17 sheds in there. So it's like when they're there, especially in the northern states. Like you said, Dan, if that was probably the only food source, like ag food source for a couple miles, and it seemed like every buck probably in 2-3 mile radius was in there. And there was good bedding pretty adjacent to that, like within, I don't know, we were only half mile off that, and this place doesn't really get any traffic in the winter. There's no reason for people to be in there. So I think those deer are undisturbed. There's a food source and good bedding and just all the right ingredients for concentrating the sheds. Oh, this is a good one, Dan. This is right up your alley. Nathan Suter says, Dan, I found a shooter buck very close to a parking lot. That's all he says. It doesn't say how many yards or whatever, but is it okay to park in that spot or should I park somewhere else? So Dan, maybe give us 1 or 2 scenarios. Let's say the buck's 200 yards away and the other one it's 800 yards away from the parking lot. Would you park there? And yes or no? And then how would you approach that spot?
I'd kind of look at it like this. Are other people parking in that parking lot? There's a possibility that there isn't right now.
Yeah.
There's a possibility that there is. If there's other people parking there, I'd be parking there, probably. If there's not, and it's been like abandoned for the winter or something, you're the only one hunting over there, I would probably, park down the street or something like that and not make an obvious move because, if he's watching, he's laying there by the parking lot and people are always parking there and stuff, he's used to that. Now, if you go to the parking lot and walk straight at them, that's a whole different ballgame because they're set up for that. That's why they're there, kind of. They monitor that, right? So you might have to, walk around in a circle. You might have to go up the street and come in. There's things you got to do based on where he's living and how he's living. But really, if you know where the buck's living, you probably got an idea where he's bedding. If you haven't already figured that out, if you haven't walked in there and seen it, but you probably got an idea of that. So, and you probably got an idea of the travel. I mean, you probably answer your own question. I don't have to. Every scenario is different. You kind of got to look at where is he? Why is he there? What's he monitoring? How is he monitoring it? How can I get in there undetected? But most of the time, I'd be parking right in the same parking lot because that's where everybody parks. That's what they're used to. What you do when you leave that vehicle is when you got to play games with this deer you're hunting, because a lot of times they're just sitting there listening and watching, or a lot of the swamp terrain, they're not really watching because they're down in cattails or whatever. But you're getting out of your car and going past. I mean, where I shot that 400-pound slot buck, I could see my vehicle, and there's so many people that were parking in that parking lot and walking by, not just hunters, people walking dogs and everything else. I mean, right next to me. If they looked hard enough, they'd see me in the tree. They're probably 90 yards away on this main trail, and these big bucks are walking around right there. Right in the evening.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. But they know that's danger. This is not. That's why they're there. Deer are different than like bears. Bears will not do that. You won't find a bear right next to somebody's house or something like that, or right next to a main parking lot. They want to get remote. Deer will live right under your nose. They just need like an acre that nobody goes into, and they're fine.
Yeah, I'd say for people that are going to look to do any elk hunting, I'd say elk are more like bear, with the exception of hunting preserves or non-hunting areas. But if there's elk hunting pressure in the area, don't even bother with the first mile from the road. You better be hiking out there, because that's my experience in Montana anyways. Every time I get into elk, it's miles back. Like they're in the pockets where people
the big difference too, I don't think you can really be an elk size animal, like say a 6x6 elk, and walk around 100 yards from the road and not get noticed.
Yeah,
exactly. They can blend into cattails, they can blend into a little bit of brush and never be seen. An elk's a pretty giant animal, so they gotta kick back. Deer are kind of the exception. People don't give them that. They believe those deer got to be way back there. They got to outwalk people. They got to go out, and it's just not really true. You just have to look at, it might be outwalking people. It might not. It's wherever people don't go.
Yeah, and you say it and say it and say it, and I think you say it and say it because that's the most important aspect of finding these mature bucks. It's like wherever that spot is. And Dan, I know this is why you've cast so many nets every year, even though you have spots that have produced historically. It's because every year that can and usually is a different spot, right? It's not last year's big buck, it's this year's big buck. And
even when you find a really good spot, usually you get one giant, and then if you keep hunting that, even if it's just once or twice a year or whatever, those deer aren't even growing up there. I mean, if they did, you'd kill them, right? You'd kill them before they got to age. You'd kill them when they're 140s or something, right? It seems like the first time I kill one of those giants is the first time I hunt them in there, or the second year, But after that, they're not getting to age or whatever, and it changes. But usually I'm finding some unique scenario where nobody's really ever hunted. I shouldn't say never, but nobody's ever seriously hunted or figured out. And you figure out the whys, the hows, the whens, and you wait and go in at the right timing. And it's the first time you go in there, you kill the giant. And after that, I never seem to kill a giant in those spots again. You kill good bucks. I mean, I've got areas where I've got one spot where I think we've killed probably going on 15, 16 bucks out of one bedding area that are real nice. But I can only really recall one absolute giant in there, which we never did kill. All the rest of the bucks were just nice.
Yeah.
Nice bucks. Nice bucks being like up to about 3 years old. They start to get to be, 5, 6, 7 years old. They've got it figured out, especially in pressure areas. This isn't Saskatchewan or Manitoba or something. In this area, or any area in the Midwest, if it's public land, I mean, there's a ton of people going through this stuff, and these deer figure out where people aren't, and they just use that to their advantage. It can be such small micro areas,
Yeah, it doesn't take much. I mean, how many times have you or I or anybody seen one going through the woods 30, 40 yards away? You barely see them. They don't need to skirt you by too much, especially with archery equipment, to get away. Let's go ahead and announce the winner. We got 1 minute left, and I'm just checking the last ones here. We didn't get anybody exact, so A. Lauders, Lauters, A. Lauders. You are the winner of today's giveaway, which again is Lathrop and Sons. You're going to get a pair of non-typical insoles and a pair of the Synergy insoles. So A. Lauders, send me an email at thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com. That's all one word, thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com. I need your name, shipping address, boot size, and phone number. That's name, shipping address, boot size, and phone number. Congratulations, and thanks again to Steven and Lathrop and Sons for putting on the giveaway. Next week will be the grand prize. So today was the last insole giveaway. They put on quite a giveaway this year, so appreciate those guys. Dan, let's do one or two more here. And I lost it, but I'm going to find. We had a good question. Billy Davis says, Dan, found an island in the middle of the marsh. Big mature oaks, lots of big buck sign, rubs, scrapes. It's a 3-acre island. Cell cam or no cell cam? So that's all the details we have. Dan, what would influence your decision to put a cell cam on an island? Let's say you scouted it this spring. It's new to you, like it sounds like it's new to Billy, and you're trying to learn more about it. What impacts, one, if you're going to put a cell cam there, and two, if you are, how do you place that on a new island? What are you looking for specifically?
Okay, so what would tell me to place a cell cam there? Number one would be I don't have all the information. I don't understand when they're bedding there. I don't understand why they're traveling there. Or I just want to know exactly what animals are there. Now, the cell cam will alert some deer. You might be able to get away with putting it in a tree and not have an alert, but it just seems to me that they know it's there. I have a lot of deer skirt those cameras. So it does do some damage, I think. But it can help you too. It can give you timing. You can know when there's something good there. You can know what animals are going through there on a regular basis. If I was going to put one there, I'd make sure it had a really good battery pack and it was there for a long time before season, into season, and that the batteries would last. Like the cameras I'm using now are Moultrie's. I can put, what is it? I think 16 batteries in there. And if I put 16 lithium in there, the batteries cost me more than the camera costs. But
yeah.
The cameras I have out right now have been out since August, and they're still working, and they're still taking pictures of deer.
Yeah, pretty good for cell cam that long.
Right. So, I mean, investing in the right camera and the right batteries is huge because they got to get used to it. But I don't tend to put those on islands, but sometimes that can be a mistake too, because what I have had happen is now all these people are starting to island hunt. And what they do is they put a camera on the island and claim it. Didn't you see my camera? I've been hunting here for, all summer and all fall. And, this is my island kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, I've been hunting here for 30 years, dude.
Yeah.
But, fine, whatever. But I'm just saying that's another reason people put it there is kind of to claim it. But that doesn't stop somebody from hunting it. I see a camera there and I walked all the way out there, I'm hunting. But I don't necessarily want to hunt where somebody else is hunting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you didn't find any hunter sign, you should be able to just go in there, scout it out really good in the wintertime, figure out your trees and where you want to hunt, and just come back in and, when the acorns are dropping, give it a hunt. Come back, rut, give it a hunt. Maybe come back later and give it a hunt. But I wouldn't give it too many hunts or it'll just turn into everything else. If you enter once or twice precision moves, you should be able to get a deer. If you are going to put a camera on there, I would probably put it in a spot where you can cover every deer crossing the island. I would probably try to have it back far enough that it's not spooking deer, that it ain't right up against the trail. Not trying to get precision pictures, but just trying to get an inventory, kind of thing.
Sure.
So you know what you're up against. Generally, those bucks are bedded really close to those islands, especially if they're feeding on them, especially if the acorns are dropping to right on the edges of the island. So you got to figure out a way to sneak in there. So when you look at it in wintertime, I would walk the edges of that island, look at the trails coming in and out of there. Generally, the bedding is off of tapered down points. And usually one end of the island will taper down into a point that has like some brush into it and some good bedding. And usually they'll be in there and they'll kind of right up out of it onto the island. And you just got to be as close as possible before they spread out into that, 3 acres. And now they can be over there, or they can be over here. So you got to get really close, but sneak in and get to a point where you can shoot all the way across the island at that tip coming into there. And that doesn't mean that they don't come in from a different spot occasionally. And that's another thing a camera can teach you is if the deer are coming from different ways, a camera could teach you which way they're coming from, without having to learn it the hard way.
So like all things deer hunting, the answer is it depends.
Correct.
Yeah. And Dan, we talked about this quite a bit too, but put your detective hat on, right? Like, right. And that detective hat gets better the more experience you get and the more time you spend out in the woods doing the scouting. But you got to start somewhere. So put that hat on and make your best guess. And if it turns out to not be the exact right spot the following year, the next time you reposition that camera, you just get a little better every time and hopefully get it dialed in.
Let me add to that once.
Yeah.
So now here's another aspect that we didn't discuss that probably should be discussed. Because it almost sounds a little bit, now I'm not trying to put him into a certain situation, but it kind of sounds a little bit like putting your eggs in one basket. Because you got to remember, I'm hunting 50 islands like that in a year. Well, not 50, but probably 20 island scenarios in a year. Do I got 20 cameras out there? Do I got to monitor every one of them with a camera? You know what I mean? If you're going in for 1 or 2 precision hunts like you should, that's, if it's your best one and you think that's great and you want to put a camera in or you want to see what's going on, those cameras can teach you a lot more than you can learn from 1 or 2 sits. So fine. But are you going to put a camera on every one of 20 islands? You know what I mean? Some people will. But the next day you're going to be on a different one. The next day you're going to be on this point over here. You're going to be on that finger over there. You can't really focus on just that island. I mean, it's real easy. I mean, especially when you get into beast hunting, and you can probably attest to this because you came into it like on the hunting beast, right?
Oh, yeah.
So most guys that come into this, they come in and they look at the methods and they go, this guy's an idiot. He's crazy. This ain't really going on. And then they're like, I got to test this theory. There's enough of this that makes sense, but it just seems a little weird. And they go out and they walk into one of these islands and they're like, there's no way there's a deer out here. And all of a sudden they see all these rubs coming in there and they go down to the point and the beds are right where they're supposed to be. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill this deer. I know right where it's at. It's not that easy.
Right.
You got to be there the day that deer is there and the day he does what he's supposed to do. And it's not as easy as it seems. But when you go and you look at those bed areas, they seem so great, which is why when you find those great scenarios, hey, awesome, make your setup. I'll go find another one because you're going to need more than one. You're going to need backups. If you hunt 10 times a year, you're going to need 10 spots a year. If you hunt 60 times a year, you're going to need 60 spots. Because if you start hunting those same spots over and over and over again, you're just going to screw yourself up. You're going to screw up the spots, so they're not going to be no good anymore. You're going to lower your odds instead of raise them. If you got, if you're hunting 40 times a year and you're hunting 4 spots, your likelihood of getting a deer are way less than if you hunted those 4 spots 4 times, didn't hunt the whole rest of the year, and then you hunted those 4 spots 4 times the next year. You're killing yourself because you're educating those deer. What people can't understand is it isn't just getting seen. We think with our eyes. Those deer know everywhere you walked, everywhere you've been, because they can smell it. They can smell where you've been. They can smell where you touched. They can smell where 10 feet downwind from where you were. So it's really about not bothering them till the exact day, right? So you got 1 or 2 hunts, and then if you go in there and you hunt it and you say, well, I'm going to let it cool off. You wait 15 days. That's probably about when your scent is wearing out of there. So you just keep getting your scent in there over and over again. You know what I mean? And your
Yeah.
scent's there the whole season. So you really got to give it to those deer. A lot of times I'll go into those really the spots I really want to preserve and keep for myself. I'll go into them with the wind to my face, not really on a deer trail, and kind of maneuver my way through some nasty stuff right to the edge and up a tree with the wind in my face. So my wind's blowing out and dropping into the cattails or whatever it is behind me, never touching where those deer walk. And then when I come back a different day, they've never even known I was there, unless one deer got lucky enough to curve around that way.
Yeah, it's important to first time sits. It's again one of those things that you harp on, but you harp on it for good reason because it's so important. Like there's common themes that come up in the show regularly, and it's because those are like the pillars of the tactics, right?
Yeah, the hard part is most of these guys, they start out not shooting anything, and then they get a doe or a little buck or two, and they want to do better, and they want to do better, and then they get to a point where they start shooting 2-year-old deer that are like nice 8 points, nice 10 points, but they're 2-year-old deer or 3-year-old deer, and they think, I got this, I know what I'm doing now, and they just keep repeating that method. But that's not shooting mature bucks. Mature bucks have to be treated a whole different way. And unless you get outside of that box that you put yourself in because you've gotten better than all your friends shooting these 2- and 3-year-olds, you'll never shoot those giants. I mean, there's plenty of people that are shooting more deer than I am, but they're not shooting more giants on public land than I am. And that's because I'm putting myself in a situation of hunting giants on public land. Hunting 2- and 3-year-old deer, you can hunt funnels, you can hunt these really good spots over and over and over again and kill deer out of them every year. Or you can, force yourself to go hunt certain animals or certain scenarios and put yourself in the box for those big animals. And a lot of people won't do that. They won't jeopardize their 2- and 3-year-old bucks to do that. And because of that, they never step up to the level of shooting deer that are 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah, you got to buy that $100 million lottery ticket.
Correct.
You can't win if you don't buy it.
No risk, no reward.
Yeah.
And you'd think people would get bored of shooting 140-inch or 130-inch bucks after a while.
I don't know too many guys that get bored of that. They're out there, but I think the majority, like you said, the majority of people, especially 140s, it's hard for, you get guys that'll pass, year or two, sometimes 3-year-old deer, but you start getting 140s. It's on public land, especially. I think it gets pretty thin for the guys.
I should have probably said 120 class deer.
Sure, that I think is a little more reasonable. Dan, let's do one more. Before we would do that, got a lot of members on today. Just want to thank everyone that tuned in, but especially the members that help support the channel. Want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas too. That's just around the corner. Hopefully, you have time to spend with your family and enjoy what it's all about. So, thanks for everyone for tuning in, and Merry Christmas.
Thanks, guys.
Elizabeth Williams says, Dan, can you elaborate on how hunters work in cycles? They hammer areas a couple of years, ruin, then abandon after noticing and finding success in a couple of years. The deer come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. I've got spots. There's one spot in particular that's very hard and remote to get to. And for years, I had it to myself, and I had such good success there with giant bucks. And then one year, somebody found it. And they see the rubs. I would imagine, no, I didn't really talk to the guy, but I imagine he probably either shot a buck or saw a big buck, because he really couldn't sit there without it, without getting into some sort of action at some point. But after a season of him hunting there, it just went cold. This island that was always rubbed up was rub free. I mean, you couldn't even find a finger-sized rub on it. And he had a beat trail going to a stand that he locked to a tree, which is illegal. But that's how he could get out there, where I hiked back with it on my back. Anywho, he hunted there again the next year. And I had a camera there. You go in there, you periodically check, okay, he's still here, you move on. When we would leave, this was a surprising part for me. When he left, it took about 2 years before I started seeing good buck activity there again, and 3 years before I started seeing big bucks in that area again. And then it started getting good again, as long as I hunted it like once a year. And then somebody else would come along and it'd be the exact same cycle. Where it would just be like these guys come in there and they piss pound it and the deer go away, but they would stay away for up to a couple of years after the guy would be done hunting. It's like generations learn not to go there. I mean, the does would teach the fawns not to go there or whatever.
Yeah.
But it would be generational. I mean, and a deer had to grow up in there and grow a big rack without seeing pressure there to come back. You know what I mean? So yeah, these guys can do some damage, and then when they leave, it will come back around, but it takes time. And you got to take a grain of salt there too, because every area is a little different too. Like that particular area, I think a guy could shoot big bucks there on a more regular basis. I mean, actual mature bucks, because I would see them there on a more regular basis. But what I have learned is in that particular spot, when they'd come through, they learned where the trees were that people hunted out of, and they would avoid them. You'd see them, but they go in a way about never going past those trees that were always the funnel in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as soon as you put too much pressure on those spots, those deer just move to another spot where there's not that much pressure. Why would they put their life at risk,
Yeah, it's like, again, can't overemphasize these points. Like, if you want to shoot big deer, especially on public land, you got to be creative. You got to get in these unusual spots. Dan, you've been gracious enough to tell everyone basically what you're doing and how you're doing it at your own detriment. So it's admirable, what you're doing. But that's the thing. A lot of the stuff is getting more known, and it's like, Dan, you talked about it. That's your big takeaway from the years. You got to get even more hardcore and get into even more unusual spots. But that's what it takes. It's like, and Dan, I respect you a lot for taking on the challenge, right, and enjoying that part of the game, because it's tough. It's tough.
Hunt harder, go deeper, get wetter.
Yeah.
As long as you can outdo everybody else, you'll still have success. It's not a competition. I hope everybody that's listening, you're all my friends. I hope you kill big bucks. I don't want you not to.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be some game hog who kills the biggest bucks and says, hey, look at me, I'm the greatest. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are like that. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it in the comments and stuff where, the anger people about a deer or something. It's like, geez, man, it's just hunting. I'm trying to help people, not hurt them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really about, we're all brothers out there. It isn't a competition. I'm not trying to be the world's best deer hunter or have the most deer on my walls. I have just as much pride if one of my friends or somebody else takes a deer, and if somebody I don't even know I run into in a swamp has shot one, needs help, I'll go help them find it. That's what it's about. It's about camaraderie. It's about bringing us all together. And some people just don't want to bring us all together. They want less hunters. They want greater hunting for themselves. They want bigger bragging rights. And to me, that's just not what it's about. It never has. Well, when I was younger, it probably was a little bit about bragging, honestly. I mean, but I've been, you grow older, your values change. And I'd rather see, everybody be a little more successful, have fun. To me, I used to watch all these people go on public land and never kill nothing, never see nothing. And you see them get frustrated and move away from hunting. I don't want to see that. You give them a little hope. You teach them how to kill deer, and they don't go away. They start having fun with it, and they can teach your kids, and they can move on. I mean, when I grew up, there was nobody really hunted right. And it was like weird because I was kind of self-taught because I really didn't have mentors. I mean, my brothers went off to Vietnam, and my dad was busy with 2 jobs trying to keep us alive, and I just went out and went hunting. And because of that, I didn't learn the bad habits of all these people. And going out there and learning from the animals and stuff, I started hearing when I got older and started getting into the hunting, more and more and more, you start gravitating towards people who hunt and talking about hunting, right? And people would tell me just stuff. It would be like, what? Because that ain't what I see. It didn't matter. And I think enlightening people and bringing them out of that, just doing the same stupid stuff over and over again, like, just hunting where there's rub lines in the middle of open forests and stuff. I mean, bringing them back into, it's really just common sense. If you can get them to start thinking in the right direction, you start to realize this is all common sense. You know, the deer are smarter than you think. They don't just work a certain pattern. They're not like a pheasant or something. You know, they actually have a little bit of a mind to them.
All good takeaways. And Dan, the stuff you said there initially about, you know, not wanting to shoot the biggest buck or be a game hog and getting people involved. I think that's a great message, especially on Christmas. So can't think of a much better place to wrap it up for today. Want to thank everyone again that tuned in. And Dan, I think Tuesday's New Year's Eve. So if we do a show next week, which I think at a minimum, we're going to try to get Steven on to do the giveaway. It'll be Monday most likely. So regular viewers, watch out for Monday, and we'll try not to mess up your New Year's Eve with the podcast.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next week.